Title: The Forgotten Twin. Year: 113,333,333. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the cry-lined borderlands of Elder, a girl was born without a cry. Her breath shallow and eyes too knowing for a newborn. She was the second twin, uncelebrated and unnamed, called simply the Forgotten. While her sister basked in the warmth of prophecy, the Forgotten Twin was hidden. A ghost raised in silence beneath the room-keeper's watch. The room-keeper was an old man with glyphs etched into every inch of his skin, each mark a vow taken, a truth witnessed. He saw the child's strength not in power, but in her stillness, the uncanny ability to endure without being seen. He trained her in secret, not to strike, but to stand, not to chase glory, but to endure what others could not. Victory sometimes means survival, nothing more and nothing less. He said the night she etched her first rune, a mark upon her palm that would never fade. Chapter 2. The realm trembled. In the high cities of Zareth, rulers conspired, hungry to rewrite the prophecies of stone, to elevate one twin and erase the other. The chosen twin, beloved and adorned, was taken by the council to lead a war she did not understand. The Forgotten was left behind again, unseen. The darkness moves in shadows, and so did she. The room-keeper guided her to the hollow archive, a sanctuary of forbidden truth. There she read what had been erased pages that told of her birth, her binding to the land's deepest rhythms, and the future only she could wither. "I will not take the throne," she whispered, "but I will keep the realm from crumbling beneath it." Chapter 3. The final siege came not by army, but by silence, unnatural stilling of wind, water, and well. The chosen twin stood upon the citadel, paralyzed by fear and betrayal, her power rendered inert by the council's meddling. The Forgotten Twin arrived unseen. She wore no armor, no blade, only the marks upon her skin and the rune-keeper's final gift. A single phrase that, when spoken, would undo the false weave of fate. As the sky cracked open and the last defenders fell, she stood alone before the gate. "I am not chosen," she said. "I am necessary." She pressed her marked palm to the stone and spoke the rune aloud. Light poured outward. The false prophecies dissolved. The council scattered like ash, and the realm, gasping and trembling, survived. The Forgotten Twin vanished that day, her name never recorded. But the land bore her echo, and the citadel's gate would never close again. And beneath the old tower, the last rune remained. Victory sometimes means survival, nothing more and nothing less. Title: The Grief Singer. Year: 113,205,127.8. Year: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The river galleon once roared through the heart of Lareth, carving valleys and nourishing every stone, field, and bone. But by the time the grief singer returned, it whispered only in trickles, burdened by dams and greed. She had not sung in 20 years. Once a voice of sorrow and ceremony, she had disappeared when the Council of 12 declared the river a resource, not a spirit. Songs, they said, could not irrigate fields or power forges. And yet crops failed, wells grew bitter, trade shriveled. Prosperity, it turned out, was a brittle thing when it ignored its roots. Her voice returned on the eve of collapse, soft as dusk wind, sometimes letting go as the bravest form of command. And Lareth began to listen. Chapter 2. The council convened under fading banners, desperate to restore what they had quietly ruined. The grief singer stood uninvited at their dais, her hair woven with riverweed, her eyes clear with ancient grief. She brought with her the flame of identity, once thought lost, a ceremonial fire lit only when a people chose to become something new. "You seek control," she said, her voice low, "but survival demands surrender, not to weakness, to wisdom." The young counselor rose. "If we let go, who guides us?" "The river," she replied. "Let it flood, let it cleanse, let it teach." Chapter 3. Under the grief singer's guidance, the dams were dismantled, not in rage, but in ritual. Each stone removed was paired with a song, each song a memory, each memory a lesson. The river swelled, it surged, it screamed, and then it sang. Fields revived, birds returned. The flame of identity was brought to the river's edge and allowed to drift downstream, carried into the earth's embrace. The council dissolved itself, replaced by a circle of caretakers, farmers, fishers, poets, children. They made no law that was at first approved by the river. The grief singer sang once more and vanished. Some say she became part of the water. Others say she was always just a voice the river lent to those willing to listen. And so Lareth lived not by domination, but by reverence. The river taught them Prosperity flows only where respect runs deep. Title: The Teacher Who Forgets Nothing. Year: 113,076,922.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the half-buried city of El Turan, memory was a weapon, and justice a myth wrapped in shadows. It was said the catacombs beneath the city hummed with the echoes of unresolved wrongs, and those who listened too long were swallowed by their sound. The teacher who forgets nothing did not listen, he remembered. Every injustice, every whispered betrayal, every time someone turned away from truth. His mind was a maze of scars, and his voice held the weight of the unspoken. Above, the starbinder lit sigils into the sky with blood and fire, sending silent warnings to the city's elite. She was feared by the powerful, loved by the broken, and bound to the teacher by a history too painful to name. Forgiveness is not forgetting, the teacher murmured as they stood before the old court ruins. It's releasing the tether, but not before it drags them down, the starbinder replied. Chapter 2. A new governor had been appointed to El Turan, a man who prided himself on order and silence. His first act was to dismantle the archives of harm, the erasing records of corruption to restore a false peace. The teacher reopened them with one breath. He released the names, the faces, the cries. Holograms flickered through the alleys, testimonies, confessions, screams. The city choked on its buried past. The starbinder wove constellations of witness above the governor's mansion. Each star was a soul abandoned. The sky screamed. Resistance spread like in fiction, but it was not loud. It moved in flickers and shudders, in knowing glances, and the refusal to forget. Chapter 3. The governor called for purging. He unleashed the revelers' enforcers who unraveled memory itself. The teacher did not run. He opened his mind like a tomb, flooding the streets with memory. The revelers collapsed under the weight of what they were ordered to erase. The starbinder pulled light from darkness, fusing names into new stars, unchangeable, unerasable. The city changed. It did not celebrate. It mourned, but it also breathed. And that breath at last was honest. The teacher vanished into silence. The starbinder remained, watching the constellations. Justice had not brought joy, but it had brought harmony. And in the ruins, someone carved words into stone. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's releasing the tether. Title: The Hunter of Night. Year: 112,948,717.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The borderlands between Varn and the Forgotten Coast were blank on every map, erased not by time, but by shame. It was here the Hunter of Night roamed, known by few and understood by fewer. He bore no torch, for his eyes had long adjusted to grief. He hunted not beasts or man, but regrets his own and others. His latest quarry was the one who eats the map, a cartographer turned heretic who burned away charts to force people to find their own truths. Their paths crossed under a new moon. I followed your absence, the hunter said, and I've erased your trail, the map eater replied. They sat, wordless, beside a fire neither claimed. Above them, silence stretched like an old wound. Even hope can become a prison, the hunter whispered, if you never ask what it guards. Chapter 2. They traveled together across burnt fields and fractured towns, places where pain had seeded generations. The map eater mocked sentiment, calling forgiveness a myth. The hunter said nothing, only watching, listening. In a village of Red Hollow, they met a woman with no memory of her son's face. She had held hatred so long it had stolen her ability to remember love. The hunter knelt and gave her a stone memory knot. It pulsed with something quiet, sorrowful, and soft. She wept. The map eater scowled. These wounds don't close with kindness. No, the hunter replied, but kindness keeps them from rotting. Chapter 3. At the edge of the world, where cliffs met endless mist, the hunter finally stopped. This is where I lost him, he said, unwrapping a cloth bundle, a child's map, etched in hope and smeared in blood. The map eater stared at it, trembling. I drew this, he confessed, before I became what I am. The hunter stepped back. Then take it, he said, not to chart your future, but forgive your past. The map eater broke, not in noise, but in stillness. Together, they buried the map, not to hide it, but to honor it. As dawn broke, the hunter of night turned to leave. Forgiveness, he said, is not surrender. It's the permission to move again. And for the first time in many years, the map eater picked up a blank page, not to erase, but to begin. The world was still broken, but so were they, and they were still walking. Idol, the keeper of cosmic law. Year: 112,820,512.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. Beneath the marble towers of Louvina, wall was etched in starlight and judgment cast in shadow. The city's order was maintained not by peace, but by precision, a system where truth could be bought and silence sold. But far beneath the courthouse, hidden behind a gate of lightless stone, the true law remained. The keeper of cosmic law dwelled there. She was neither judge nor enforcer, but memory of what justice was before it was codified. She heard everything, and she forgot nothing. One night she was summoned not by council edict, but by a scream that cracked the vault above. The Mirror Mother had returned. Speak without apology, the keeper whispered as she rose. Opens a portal for others to remember who they are. Chapter 2. The Mirror Mother once stood at the city's highest court, her testimony dismantling a crime syndicate that had ruled in gold-stitched robes. She was celebrated until she vanished. Now she walked the streets again, bearing documents, confessions, secrets, names, but not to sell, to reveal. Each page she passed augmented memory. Victims spoke, officials wept, betrayers fled, the city trembled. The keeper followed closely, leaving behind ruins of finality at each place where silence had reigned. Together they moved toward the high tribunal, where the original star code, the city's purest law, remained sealed by decree. They would open it, but not without a cost. Chapter 3. The tribunal was guarded by gilded watchers, artificial beings sworn to order, not justice. As the Mirror Mother stepped forward, the keeper placed a hand on her shoulder. One must remain to seal it, the keeper said. Cosmic balance demands it. I know, the Mirror Mother replied, and I came to remind them who they were. She entered. The vault opened. First poured out unfiltered, painful, unrepentant. The people saw what they had chosen not to see. They did not riot. They remembered when the vault closed again. It was the Mirror Mother who stood within now part of the code itself. The keeper returned to the streets. Louvina changed, not overnight, not easily, but freely, and carved into the marble above the new courthouse gate. A single line read, "To speak without apology opens a portal for others to remember who they are." Title: The Memoryless Wanderer. Year: 112,692,307.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shattered Republic of Ivor, where secrets wore uniforms and trust was rationed, no name stirred more quiet fear than the memoryless wanderer. She remembered nothing of who she was, only what her body could do, and what it could do was extraordinary. Her only companion was a lockbox inscribed with runes she couldn't read, chained to her wrist. Its key, she was told, would appear only once she was ready to accept what it contained. In the ruins of the old intelligence hall, she met the child at the 10th gate, a prodigy born from betrayal, now a whisper in the underground resistance. "Why do you fight?" the child asked. "I don't remember," she replied, "but I know I must." The child nodded. "Then maybe that's enough." Chapter 2. Their mission was simple. Breach the archive vault and destroy the records used to blackmail half the continent. But beneath the mission, something deeper stirred a sense of return. Each corridor triggered fragments. The wanderer began to feel echoes, laughter, betrayal, love. Yet clarity never came, only the sting of absence. The child of the 10th gate guided her with patience rare in their whirl. "You keep looking back," the child said. "Maybe forward is where the answer lies." Moving forward means accepting some doors were meant to close, the wanderer whispered. And so they pressed on. Chapter 3. At the vault's core, they found not files, but mirrors reflecting countless versions of lives unlived. The wanderer stood before them, the lockbox humming. With trembling hands, she placed the box on the central pedestal. It clicked open. Inside, a name tag, a torn photo, and a letter written in her own hand. "I chose to forget," it read, "to become someone who could endure what I could not. If you're reading this, you've survived. Now choose carry the past or carry forward." She turned to the child. "I don't want my old self back." "Then what do you want?" "To become someone new on purpose." They burned the archive, not out of spite, but as a ritual of release. As they walked into the night, the child smiled. "You may not remember, but you taught me this resilience doesn't rebuild the old world. It remakes it." The memoryless wanderer didn't look back. She no longer needed to. Title: The Threadless Spinner. Year: 112,564,102.3. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the Parliament of Villethorn, leadership was awarded through applause meters and satire contests. The people voted not on policy, but on punchlines. Power favored the funniest, not the wisest. And somewhere between wit and ruin stood the threadless spinner, a former seamstress turned politician who never spun a single thread in office. It held the realm's fate like a drop stitch. Her speeches unraveled nonsense and stitched irony into every sentence. She wore capes made of protest banners and hats shaped like rhetorical questions. But beneath the flare was steel. With every forward breath, she announced one morning on the steps of Whimsy, "You approach the edge of who you've been." The press called it performance. The Harlequin oracle, who forecasted policies with juggling pins and puppets, knew better. "She's getting serious," he whispered, and his puppet clapped nervously. Chapter 2. The satirical aristocracy scoffed, but wanted seriousness when satire got better ratings. But the spinner didn't care. She walked barefoot through flood zones, broadcast live from bread lines, and told jokes that stung. She mocked herself harder than her enemies. She exposed the flaws not with fury, but with finesse. And slowly, awkwardly, the people began to listen. When the last stock rebellion broke out, started over a cancelled circus, the spinner stood on a pie cart and addressed both rebels and elites. "We laugh to survive," she said, "but if we never pause to weep, we forget what we're surviving." Silence fell. A pie flew. She caught it and bowed. Chapter 3. When the Grand Council collapsed under its own contradiction, appointing 12 ministers for ministry reduction, the spinner stepped forward. She didn't campaign. She didn't beg. She simply breathed, and with each breath, she stepped closer to who she needed to become. The Harlequin oracle tossed her a final prediction, a crown made of broken quills. She accepted it, and on her first day in office she said nothing. She just stitched her old protest banner into the flag, because the best leaders aren't born, they're pressed, pulled, mocked, and tested, and with every forward breath they arrive. Title: The Whispering Constellation. Year: 112,435,896.9. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The sky above Ireland no longer sang. Its stars, once bright and proud, had been dimmed by the heavy veil of ash and the doctrine of control. The Dominion ruled the land, now an order founded on silence, enforced compliance, and absolute possession of all things once sacred. In this grim world, a myth persisted of the Whispering Constellation, an entity that moved through the shadows of memory and sky, reminding the people of what they had surrendered in exchange for false safety. Beneath a rusted observatory dome, a child stirred the child made of absence. She had no name, no origin. She had appeared one night, carried by wind and starlight, and left behind only questions, raised by rebels who barely believed in rebellion. She was silent, but watchful. "You control your fate only by surrendering what you never owned," the rebels would murmur, teaching her the paradox of freedom. Chapter 2. As the Dominion tightened its grip, courage flickered in quiet places. Whispers moved like wildfire, that the constellation had returned, that something ancient stirred in the darkness, and that change no longer waited for permission. The child wandered abandoned sectors, mapping star patterns with chalk and bone, drawing constellations on walls like runes. Her silent defiance was a signal, and people began to notice. She met the constellation near the ruins of the old dome, not as a glowing figure of myth, but as a weathered woman cloaked in dust and stories. Her eyes shimmered with galaxies. "You are the reminder," she said to the child, "the gap where obedience once sat." The child did not speak. She offered a single star-shaped shard, placed reverently in the elder's palm, and pulsed. Chapter 3. Together they walked into the Capitol Square, where no one had dared gather in decades. They did not shout or threaten. They merely drew in silence constellations, in chalk and flame, across the cold stone. One by one, citizens stepped from hiding. Some knelt, some lit torches, some simply stood, trembling but defiant. The Dominion forces arrived in silence. Their weapons gleamed. Their orders were clear, but none fired. The commander, shaking, looked at the child made of absence and dropped his weapon. "This was never ours to keep," he said. And so the Dominion began to dissolve, not in blood, but in surrender. The sky began to clear. Stars reappeared, faint but determined. In the years that followed, the Whispering Constellation and the child were never seen again. But each night, the stars sang a little louder, and children etched constellations onto walls as if remembering something they had never been taught. Because courage, once awakened, is never truly silent again. Title: The Ash-Lunged Prophet. Year: 112,307,692.1. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. Smoke rose endlessly from the mines of Teleran, where iron sang and lungs blackened. Progress, they called it. The forges never stopped. The sky turned gray, and those who coughed too loudly were told to be grateful. Among them walked the Ash-Lunged Prophet, so named not for his illness, but for what he survived. He wore no robes, carried no scrolls. His sermons were fits of breath and grit, laced wisdom. When your truth costs you everything false. He rasped one morning, standing atop a broken smelter. You are finally rich. They laughed at first, but the unmade tiller did not. Chapter 2. The unmade tiller had once grown the city's food, until they paved his fields and told him to mine instead. Now he wandered, planting ideas in exhausted soil. Together, the prophet and tiller traveled across teller and scarred districts. They asked no one to rebel. They asked only one thing. Change your mind. They taught smiths to rest, children to question, foremen to share water. Small shifts, imperceptible at first, until the smoke began to clear. Chapter 3. The city's leaders saw the change as infection. They summoned the prophet to the grand furnace for clarification. He arrived without protest. What have you done? They demanded. Reminded them they are not machines. He wheezed. You've cost us efficiency. I've cost you obedience. As they tried to silence him, the crowd gathered not with fire, but with stillness. They laid down tools. They stood, and the prophet, breath failing, turned to the tiller. Keep planting, he said, then fell. He was buried not beneath stone, but beneath wild flowers on soil once thought barren. And above his grave, a plaque reads, When your truth costs you everything false, you are finally rich. And Talleyrand, no longer enslaved to its forges, began to breathe. Title, The Uncrowned King. Year, 112,179,486.6. Era, Bloodstone Age. Author, Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. In the city of Levan, crowns were not worn, they were inherited silently, passed through words and votes behind stone walls. Those without a voice remained faceless, drifting beneath towers gilded in decisions made without them. But deep within the root quarter, among soot and candlelight, lived the uncrowned king. He claimed no title, bore no seal. His crown was the respect of the unheard, his throne a wooden bench where he listened long after the rest of the city had gone quiet. They came to him with bruised truths and broken futures, each carrying the weight of a society deaf to its own people. He answered not with declarations, but with fire old-rooted and dangerous to those who benefited from silence. The fire in your blood is older than fear, he once told a young mother denied justice. Never apologize for the heat. And with that the flame-bearer returned. Chapter 2. The flame-bearer, long fought exiled, had once been a spark of revolution. She was memory and myth wrapped in flesh, cast out when her truth burned too brightly. Now she returned, cloaked in ash and resolve, to stand beside the uncrowned king. Together they began the silent formic gathering of those whose words had been disregarded, their names lost beneath laws never written for them. They spoke not in slogans, but in stories painful, persistent, powerful. The high table of Velen scoffed at rumors of unrest. They have no army, no leader, no doctrine, they said. They have truth, whispered the king. That is all they've ever needed. Chapter 3. As voices rose, the city trembled not from war, but from revelation. The flame-bearer lit ceremonial fires in each district, guiding citizens to speak their truths openly. One by one, the marginalized stood in the plazas, not in defiance, but in clarity. And those who ruled those who had never listened began to hear. The high table, once unreachable, cracked beneath the weight of undeniable humanity. They summoned the uncrowned king and flame-bearer not to punish, but to ask, What must we do? Start by listening, the king replied, and never stop. He placed no crown upon his head, took no title. He simply walked back into the root quarter, where justice was not a law, but a promise. The fire did not fade. It spread quiet, steady, and unapologetically hot. Title, The Goat. Face, Wanderer. Year, 112,051,281.8. Era, Bloodstone Age. Author, Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. In the hills above Dathir, a figure wandered with a cracked bell and a horned mask, half ram, half man. They called him the Goat-faced Wanderer. Some claimed he was a cursed druid. Others believed he was a former hero broken by betrayal. All agreed on one thing. Where he walked, change followed. Below him, Dathmir festered in division. Once known for its communal gardens and open councils, the city had fractured into factions. Each district defended its own, and suspicion had replaced solidarity. Then one evening, the bell rang. He stood at the city's northern gate, silent, unmoving. Chapter 2. They mocked him at first. Children threw stones. Merchants ignored him. Politicians scorned him. But he didn't leave. Instead, he lit fires. Not in protest, but in invitation. Each flame was a story, a retelling of the communal act forgotten. One by one, the curious came. He told no tales of vengeance. He only spoke of release. Release heals more than revenge ever could, he said. and it leaves room for return. Beside him soon stood the voice beneath the veil, a cloaked woman who once led that year's lost choir. She hadn't sung since the collapse of the councils. Until now. Chapter 3. Together they walked through each district, singing, listening, forgiving. The bell rang each time a wound was mended, the gardener replanted, street cleaned. The truth told. It was not easy. Some resisted, some wept, but most remembered. They remembered what they were before fear ruled them. The ghost-faced wanderer left the dawn weeks later. No farewell, just a final ring of the bell. He was never seen again, but his mask remained hung in the Hall of Waters, where Dathmere held its new united council, and beneath it, carved in soft stone, release heals more than revenge ever could. Title: The Unmade Tiller. Year: 111,923,076.3. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the quiet outskirts of Telmera, where the wind carried echoes from fields long abandoned, the unmade tiller worked soil that no longer yielded harvest. Once a revered cultivator of both land and community, he had vanished after a great famine, returning years later with haunted eyes and dirt-covered hands. No one welcomed him. No one blamed him. He had become a ghost in every cycle, present, persistent, but never truly seen. Yet each morning he rose before dawn and tilled the earth. Though no crop grew, it was not food he sought to sow now, but healing. What you feared to feel since the sun you've silenced, he whispered one morning, eyes gazing at the rising sun. The silence answered. Chapter 2. In the heart of Telmera, something had broken. The people no longer gathered, no longer shared. Each household became an island. The famine had fractured more than stomachs, it had severed empathy. The ghost in every cycle arrived without name or origin. She walked from door to door, speaking softly, listening deeply, leaving behind nothing but tears and an urge to reach out. The children followed her first, then the elders, then those who remembered how to remember. She found the unmade tiller one morning, kneeling by a withered vine. You never stopped giving, she said. No, he replied, but I forgot how to receive. Chapter 3. Together they rekindled the old rites, not with pomp, but with presence. A shared meal, a rebuilt bench, a redone well. Acts that echoed not just survival, but meaning. The unmade tiller showed others how to plant again, not for yield, but for each other. The ghost in every cycle taught them to listen, not just with ears, but with hearts. The people of Telmera began to smile again, not because they had more, but because they gave more. One evening, a feast was held. The tiller stood quietly at its edge, watching laughter rise like birds into the dusk. A child tugged his sleeve. Are you happy now? He knelt, eyes glistening. I think I finally understand what that means. The ghost in every cycle nodded once before fading into the night, her task complete. And in the fields where silence once reigned, joy bloomed again, tended not by one, but by many. Title: The Shield Without Allegiance. Year: 111,794,871.6. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the fortified city of Garenhold, loyalty was currency and allegiance a blade. Each citizen bore a mark of their house on their shoulder except one. The shield without allegiance bore no mark, no banner, no bloodline. He had once served all houses, until his refusal to choose fractured his name and elevated his legend. He stood at the border gates each morning, protecting a people who no longer claimed him. Below the towers, conflict brewed between Houseborn and Escher, trade rivals turned war, then tyrants. The shield watched, waited, and then the ash-blemished prophet arrived, limping through the southern gate. His breath redded, his words sharp. Strength begins where pride ends, he said, nodding to the shield, with the open hand reaching out. Chapter 2. The prophet spoke of a plague rising in the marshes, one that did not respect banners. House leaders scoffed. They tightened their walls, hoarded supplies, and pointed fingers. But the shield without allegiance took no orders. He gathered laborers, healers, even rival soldiers, and built a camp outside the gates. Their aid was given freely, stories shared, shields laid down. The prophet remained at his side, coughing blood, drawing maps in dust. He will be accused of treason, one farmer warned. Then let the accusation serve more than the silence ever could. The shield replied. Chapter 3. The plague reached the walls within a fortnight. The houses begged for mercy. Their guards fell. Their children coughed. The shield and his fellowship let them in. No vengeance. No banners. He gave his final breath, defending the gates from panic, not from enemies, but from those who couldn't believe they were being saved. The prophet buried him beneath a tree that bloomed only in the presence of truth. Garenhold survived, not because of its walls, but because of the one who stood beyond them. And where once 2 banners flew, now only 1 carving remained on the gate. Strength begins where pride ends, with the open hand reaching out.